now. So thank you for attending. My name is Lori Conlin. I run the postdoc office in the Career Center for the Office of Intramural Training and Education here in the OITE. Today, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Brad. Brad is our industry advisor in the OITE, who helps with all things industry related. I will be posting the slide deck into the chat, so you guys will have access to the slide deck. Additionally, this is being recorded, as you all know, because you said yes when you kind of came in. And we will post this on our YouTube page, usually within a week. It takes a little time to process all the information. So I'll be monitoring the chat as Brad talks, and we'll kind of tag team this. So Brad, take it away.
Well, thank you. As Lori said, I'm Brad Fackler. I'm the industry advisor at OITE. I've worked in and around the pharma industry for about 40 years. And I've hired over 500 people. And I began my management career in pharma back in the mid 80s. And one thing that was good about that is that I was provided a lot of training on what to look for, how to ferret out the good resumes from the not so good resumes. And on and off for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been the industry advisor at NIH. And I've worked with, by my estimate, about 800 postdocs who have gotten jobs in industry. So this stuff kind of works. So today we're going to talk about the industry overview. So look at what industry is and what types of jobs are there out there. And then we'll get into the job packages, the job packages part, which is resumes and cover letters. And like Lori said, she'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. And if it's kind of right on topic for what we're talking about, Lori, break in and we'll answer it, or I'll try to answer it during the program. So I think before we start looking at what jobs are, we should start looking at the job market. And a couple things you see when you look at this, you see the rather roller coaster effect, which is pretty normal. There is more hiring generally that goes on in the second and third quarters of the year, and less hiring that goes on in the fourth quarters of years. And what you see starting with kind of the the second and third quarters of 2019, that's the highest hiring ever in this industry. And then when you go through our pandemic year of 2020, it didn't match 2019, but it was the highest year of any except for 2019. And what you see in 2021 is that the hiring has continued to rise. So if you're looking for a job in industry, industry is likely looking for you. So when we talk about industry, it's hard. You can't completely dissociate it from academia because they tended to work together. In the good old days, and that's kind of pre-1990, it worked this way. The government funded the drug discovery. The compounds were then given over to, or shouldn't say given, were sent over, licensed by pharma, who developed them into products. And this worked pretty well until we got to 1979 with the gas crisis and the economic slowdown of 1987, and the government decided they didn't want to be in the funding of biopharmaceuticals anymore. And so pharma said, well, we can do that. So funding for the drug discovery went from pharma to academia. Now, the one hitch in this is that pharma figured out that if they were paying for this, they ought to have a say in how these studies come out. And so we had the very famous case of Vioxx and Merck, which they tried to doctor the actual results and cover up some of the side effects. And we decided that that didn't work very well. So when we got to the 2000s, we had, as the tech bubble, the private funders who funded the tech said, you know, we were really good at funding tech development. We think we can fund biotech development. And that worked pretty well until the bubble burst. And then we spent some time looking at how is this going to happen? Funding became very difficult, both in the academic area and especially for pharma and startups. But good news, we had a pandemic, and pandemics tend to put more life into the biosciences area. And so the VCs have begun funding both drug discovery and the drug research at record levels. So as I said, we're going to look at the business of healthcare and what is industry, where are the jobs and what are the jobs, and then we'll take a look at resumes and cover letters. So let's start with the industry overview. When I talk about industry, I use a very broad definition, which includes the pharma and biotech manufacturers, medical device manufacturers, service providers, including contract research organizations, regulatory organizations, marketing and analytics, consumables companies, health insurers and payers, venture capital and banking, and government agencies, such as CDC, DOD, and FDA, and so on. And the reason I use this broad definition is because most throughout this whole area, what you have to do to get a job in there is pretty consistent across all of these things. So we'll talk about some revenue estimates. In 2020, it was almost 1.3 trillion US dollars. That's the global pharmaceutical industry. About half of that, about half of that amount, 628 billion, is in biotech, medical device, life science tools and reagents, and contract research organizations. You see some pretty hefty growths in here, and that growth is really fueled has been really fueled over the last couple of years. And in all, it's about 2.5 trillion US dollars. Where does this take place? Well, you can see that almost half of the global revenues are in the US, and that's really, it's not just US, that's North America. Europe is about a quarter. The emerging markets has become quite a force in there, and then the established rest of the world, which includes China, Japan, and those areas. These numbers have come up rather dramatically. When I first started giving this presentation, growth in pharma sales in the US and Europe were just a hair above 0%. So they have grown significantly, and a lot of that is driven by the cell and gene manufacturing organizations and products. Global growth just a hair under 6%. The other thing that fuels this is R&D spending. So you get, here's the global revenues for the companies and the percentage that they spend in R&D. You look at that for biotech, you in general see lower revenue numbers, but higher percentages of these. These tend to be younger companies and are putting more and more into R&D. And then from the medical device side, we don't have the percentage here, but you can see the big players. In general, pharma and biotech spends about 16% of their annual sales on R&D. Here's a number that I thought was very big. You saw the hiring by quarter that I showed you several slides back. But you can see that in just 4 years, the number of pharma and biotech employees has grown by 50%. So there is really a lot of hiring that is going on in this marketplace. So where are the jobs? Well, the jobs anywhere from the early stage and startups, which have revenues of 0 to 100 million and 1 to maybe 20 employees, all the way up to the mega companies, revenues greater than 10 billion and 70,000 plus worldwide, and anywhere in between. I've tried to put a chart together so that you can see some of the examples of in the various areas, from pharmaceuticals down to contract research organizations, excuse me, starting with the mega and then the early stage startups. And I've tried to put a number of Maryland companies on here. So where are the opportunities? Or I should say, what are the opportunities? The opportunities are in all over the industry. In the area of R&D, there is clinical research, discovery research, and preclinical research, biopharmaceutical product development, and project management. In the commercial, there's obviously sales and marketing, but also corporate communications and business development. And there is an area between the commercial and the R&D, which is product support, regulatory affairs, and medical affairs. There is operations, so it's bio IT operations, which is manufacturing and quality. And then there are the services. And virtually any of these areas in pharma, sometimes companies will contract those out. So these can be anywhere. And if you're interested in learning more about these, I recommend this book. It's called Opportunities in Biotechnology and Drug Development. The author is Toby Friedman. What the book does is takes the jobs in all of these areas and gives you a thumbnail description of what the jobs are. What's the background and experience they would look to hire somebody into that position? What do people do on a daily basis that do these jobs? And then what might these jobs set you up for in terms of future movement, either within your own company or within the industry? So we'll take a little bit of look at each one of these so you can see what some of the qualifications in the discovery work and in the preclinical preclinical development, you see a little bit about what they do and the qualifications. These are generally PhD and MD level jobs. Clinical development, these two are PhD and MD level. These generally will require some form of experience in clinical development. In project management, again, these are MD, PhD level jobs with project management experience. And then pharma development, again, these are PhD level positions. Now, I'll take one here, the preclinical, and kind of drill down into that a little bit. So we'll take a look at that, and we'll look at what do these people do? Well, they do drug characterization, evaluating and selecting the most promising candidates, and conducting animal studies on these. The career tracks are, you can see here, metabolism and pharmacokinetics, tox, safety, pharmacology, translational research. And I bring this up because in general, people that move from NIH to a job in preclinical development will be doing pretty much the same things that they're doing now in your postdoc. Now, the context is a little bit different. In your NIH lab, you're doing that for scientific edification. You probably want to get a publication out of it. And in the industry, they do it for product development. They want to develop different, but the jobs in these areas are very similar to what you're doing now. Here's the marketing ones. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I'm not thinking that there's a lot of you going into there. But what you can see are these are mainly bachelor's and master's degree level positions. The exception here is sometimes in the business development area, they will have PhD people who will work in the business development and stay with a compound or a product that is either in-licensed or out-licensed. In the product support, these are mainly MD, PhD, PharmD level positions. These are people that interact directly with customers. So answering scientific questions, providing scientific information, and working oftentimes with the clinical faculty in the medical schools. The manufacturing area or the operations area, again, these are mainly bachelor's and master's level. Sometimes PhDs are common here in the particularly in the quality in the supervisory roles. And finally, from the opportunity in the services, and as I said, all operations within a company can be outsourced to one of these. So the job opportunities go the gamut from the bachelor's level to the master's to the PhD and MD levels. So if we just take a look at this and look at it through a different microscope, look at each of these areas by degree. As we said, the commercial areas, it is mainly bachelor's and some master's with occasional PhD. The product support, the medical affairs, regulatory affairs, mainly PhD, MD level positions. And R&D, it's the same. These are mainly PhD and MD positions. There are some master's level and some bachelor level, and these are more at the technician area, jobs. And then the biomanufacturing, as we said, mainly bachelor's, master's degrees with supervisory positions, oftentimes being held by PhDs. And the services, because it could be pretty much anything, this goes across the board from the bachelor's, master's, PhD, and MD level positions. As I say, if you're interested in getting more information on that, the book is very good. It's also very good for those of you that are thinking about, hey, I might like to go into industry, but I don't know what the jobs are. And this gives you a good overview of what is out there. So if you have ever looked for a job, you will see something that looks like this. And I think it's really important to talk about what you should look for and what you shouldn't look at. So first of all, what you should look at are the key words. So you look at product formulations, physical form and property, conduct, formulation and development studies, collaboration, supervise, and then PhD with a light science concentration, liquid dosages. These are the things that if your resume has these on here, that's what you want to look for. What you don't want to look for is the position title. And that's because across the industries, there is almost no consistency with how companies define these positions. So here is a director reporting to a senior vice president, and there may be a tendency to say, "Ooh, that sounds like a high level." Well, it could be that there's only 20 people in the company, and so everybody is a director or a senior vice president. Here again, this one is process development manager reporting to a senior director. Not so important. But what is scale up bioreactor processes, mammalian cell culture, data analysis, technical reports, things like that. So if you've got that experience, you want to make sure those are the kinds of things that are in your resume, number one, and those are the kinds of things that you're looking for when you're looking for the job ads and to begin looking for that position. So where are the job likely to be? Well, the jobs in research are predominantly in the biotech and the early stage companies. So the drug discovery, a lot of it is done in the smaller and startup companies. The development positions are in the mid to mega companies and in the CROs. And business development, well, the out licensing would be smaller companies looking to out license their technology to be developed by a bigger company. And in license would be the bigger companies looking to bring in technologies to develop from the smaller companies. Medical affairs, and these are larger companies with products on the market and products ready to launch. Regulatory affairs, mid to mega companies, products that are going through the final the regulatory approval process to get their products on the market. Product support, again, these are the larger companies with the marketing and launch products. The quality companies with manufacturing and contract manufacturing organizations. So that's where these jobs would be. And management consulting is around companies that are in transition. So companies that are growing, companies that may be downsizing. Those would be the areas there. For those of us in the US, the biotech and pharma companies, they tend to be clustered and they tend to be bi-coastal. So here on the East Coast, it begins down in the Research Triangle Park area. It comes up through Maryland, up to Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, and then up to Boston. On the West Coast, it is San Diego, up to Orange County, to the Bay Area, and up to Seattle. And there are other pockets of biotech companies that are growing. Generally, they will grow up around major medical centers where technologies will be spun out. So with that, we've come to the end of the first part. So we'll stop a minute and see if anybody has any questions.
So Brad, I was just typing it, but now you can say it. One question, I know you'll probably get to this later, is everyone wants to know, it says 5 years experience, but should I still hire? Should I still apply? Sorry.
Yeah. Can we hold off on that?
Yep. Okay.
On that question till we talk about the resumes. Yes.
All right.
That's a very good question. And I tell you, I'll answer it now, and then I'll explain my answer a little bit later. The answer is yes. You should apply for those. So.
And then the only other question I see here is from Dr. Deo, and that was covered what the data was around hiring from 2020, 2021. So for those of the folks who came in just a smidge late, can you just do the recap of what has COVID done to hiring?
Yeah, I'm going to go back and show that slide because you can't talk about it without the slide doing justice to it. So, I went too far. There you go. 2019 was the highest level of hiring in the industry ever. And 2020, even during the pandemic, while it didn't match 2019, it was higher than any other previous year. And then you can see from the first 2 quarters of 2021 that companies are really almost desperate to get good talent.
Gotta go back. All right.
All right, now I'm going to go.
Samantha asked a question about, for project management, do you not experience other than your formal graduate training? I don't think you need to go get. I'm gonna answer this one.
That's
Samantha,
fine.
You don't need to go get a project management certification course. Those are very, very expensive, but a couple of courses in project management wouldn't hurt. especially if you don't know what the word Gantt chart means, right? So don't ask me what it is. I know what a Gantt chart is, but I don't know what it stands for, but it's just something that folks use. It's GANTT. So take at least an overview course, and I'll put in something, I'll put in something into the chat about some good places to get those. Okay. Oh, FAS runs a class on it, but I'm not sure if Samantha is from here. And then one person asked is, if someone's doing something like health economics outcomes in research, which section would that fit in, Brad? Would it be, it would be very similar to the consulting section at the very end, right?
Yeah,
that section.
That would mainly be there. But that is often part of some of the larger companies. They will do that kind of research along with some of the industry organizations.
Cool. And then, all right, forward on.
Okay, this is the fun part because we're going to talk about resumes and cover letters. So talking about resumes are very different from CVs. Resumes will vary based on the job ad, and that is you don't write a new resume each time, but you make sure that the wording in your resume matches the ad. It's not the place for your life history. It's what you need. It's based on the job. And it can be in reverse chronological or functional order. The reverse chronological order in the pharma and biotech industry is what is the standard. And it focuses on results and accomplishments. And it's not necessarily scientific results, but it generally is work-related results. And the way to think about this is that your industry resume is a selling document, and it is selling the most important product, and that's you. So the way I like to think about the resume is that as you're writing this resume, remember that the people who are reading it don't know you. This is their first introduction to you. So you want to make a good impression. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But the analogy that I like to use here is that if you've ever gone into a new car showroom, you will see they have the brochures for each of the models of the cars that they have laid out. And if you open one of those up, it is generally, you will open it up to a page that has a red convertible of that model. And that's designed to get you to say, boy, I can see myself driving that. And that's what you want to do with your resume. When they read it, you want them to say, we want that person on our team. So there are the sections of the resume, and you see, and I'm not going to read them all, but I have bolded 3 of them, and that is, these are the 3 areas where it is most important in the resume. For the expertise summary and the skills section, this is where you have the easiest opportunity to match the keywords, the job responsibilities in that job ad. And then the summary of accomplishments is about what you've accomplished, not what you've done. What have you accomplished? And so we'll take a look at this. So the core expertise summary is number 1. It's for resumes only, and it's the first and easiest place to adjust to the job ad. And this is, well, this is what we see a lot of times, seeking a responsible position in industry lab doing research. Well, that is a completely useless statement. If you sent them a resume, they know you're seeking a responsible position. So we don't do that. We want to say something like a protein biochemist with 10 years experience managing research and administrative tasks. You see here, you have the opportunity to match the keywords. And the other thing that is important with this section is to be as quantitative as possible. So here, 6 years, 2 years, that kind of thing. And there's no magic number here, but you would assume 4 to 6 bullets on why you fit the job. And then the summary of accomplishments. In my mind, this is the most important part of the resume. This summarizes the accomplishments that you have put in your work experience. And again, if we look at that, the focus is on what resulted, not what you did. So in this, identified regulatory T cells as a diagnostic biomarker in experimental graft versus host disease with implications for improved clinical treatment of bone marrow transplant patients. What you did, identified T cells as a diagnostic marker, not important. What's important is that this has implications in improved clinical treatment for bone marrow transplant patients. All right. Now, when you do this, and when I work with people on their resumes, this is oftentimes the hardest thing they do. And it's not because you don't have accomplishments. It's because this is a different way of thinking about your work than you've ever thought about it before. And just another one, identified markers with potential to be used to target cancer stem cells with metastatic and drug-resistant properties in osteosarcoma. Again, what you did is identified the markers, not important, but what the result of that work is it may have implications in treating patients with osteosarcoma. This is looking at those statements just in kind of 3 different ways, depending on what type of job you may be applying for. So for a research and development position, you might say developed a cystic fibrosis transgenic mouse model that resulted in 8 peer-reviewed publications and $3.5 million in grant funding. Okay. For project management, because you're looking at budget and timing, you developed a strategy and implemented a 2.5-year, $1.3 million project in collaboration with institutional core faculty and external academic partner, resulting in a $3.6 million additional funding. Okay. You did all that, not important, but you got $3.6 million in funding. Important. And then for regulatory affairs, in collaboration with Animal Care Committee, Biological Safety, submitted and gained all necessary documentation to develop a transgenic mouse model for cystic fibrosis. Documents completed 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Again, you got a time and a budget issue here. Just another example, mentoring 3 undergraduate students, responsible for hiring and supervision. University of Michigan's Explore program. So it names something, effectively communicated and transferred complex technical information, empowered project staff to meet quality standards, use resources effectively, and deliver tasks on time. So again, your descriptions may vary depending on what job you may be applying for. So then your professional experience. And this is where you start with your accomplishment statements. So your job title and the dates and the location. And a good way to think about this to help you do this is I do X in order to understand Y. So here's what we do, not so important, but now we understand why. So you can see here, examine the fidelity of a group of whatever those intron reverse transcriptase, determined that it is the most faithful reverse transcript script days found to date. So you examined it, not important, but you found the most effective to date. And the job related accomplishments, additional detail and explanation of the summary of accomplishments. So the summary of accomplishments will take your accomplishments from each of your jobs, and you summarize those and put them at the head of the resume. I get a lot of questions on whether you should include your advisor's name. Generally, it's not important. There's two exceptions to that. One, this person may be a Nobel caliber researcher, and then you probably want to put that in. Or the other thing, and this happens more often, is that your advisor may know somebody in the company in which you're applying. Education, graduate school through undergrad, degrees and dates, very important. The postdoc shouldn't go here in your education. The postdoc should go in your work experience. And so don't add things like FES courses and OITE certificates, although OITE courses are very good, like this one today, but they're just not relevant in a job in your resume. And this gives me a chance to talk about and answer that question as to if it says 5 years experience, and why would you send that in? And that's because we write this up that your postdoc experience and the lab work experience during your PhD are in there. And so those would total to, I'm sure, more than 5 years. So that's why we put that in there. And sometimes you will read on there, it may say 5 years industry experience. And the answer to that is you go ahead and you send yours in anyway. They want experience doing the things on the job, whether it's with an industry company or not. Skills and techniques. This again, easy place, because they're going to ask they're going to list the skills that you need to do that job, and you want to match that to the degree that you can. And a good way to do that is to do it this way. And I like to see it where it is grouped for easy identification. The hiring manager who reads this generally knows what skills he wants, and you want to make it as easy as possible for he or she to see that. In here, skills not necessarily limited to your scientific skills, but also team communication, collaboration, and leadership skills that you might have as well. So team skills, you see what we normally see, but something like this: participated in lab meeting, exchanged ideas, organized collaborations, scientific discussions, integrated, managed 4 technicians, 3 graduate students, and participated in the hiring of new lab. And as an aside here, when you're writing your resume, OITE has a list of what are called action verbs. I call them resume verbs. So they're good action words, so that you can take what you've got in your resume and maybe go through and change some of those out for these. So suggestions: use reverse chronological order, starting with your current your postdoc and going back from there. Be specific, avoid jargon and acronyms, and nobody outside the government knows what some of these alphabet soups are of the institutions you work for. NIH is usually okay, but when you get to some of the other ones, you should spell out what your institution is. Use the keywords, and hit the keywords. So their words. So if they, if they're looking for somebody that has experience in nuclear magnetic resonance and you put experience in NMR, that may not catch. So you want to make sure you write your experience and your skills in the same way that it is written in the in the job ad. Results and quantifiable, if you can, works better. The action-packed verbs, we talked about that, and this one, spelling and proofreading. Have other people take a look at it. And organization and white space are very key. So how you organize this, and you want to organize it with plenty of white space around the resume so it doesn't look like things are crowded in. So some other tips, it's good to have your name and a page number on each page. And by the way, for somebody with your experience, your resume would go 2 to 3 pages. I don't recommend going much over 3, but going beyond the 1 page, what you hear is certainly okay for somebody with your experience. And the name and phone name and page number on there are very important, because you will oftentimes send your resume in electronically. Excuse me. But it will get printed. And if somebody pulls the first sheet off the printer and leaves the other 2 there, they may miss out unless you have your name on there and 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, etc. Your name in the file. So I name mine by quarters, B Fackler Q321. And it's good to do that. You don't know how many resumes I've seen that the title of the document is resumes. That doesn't do you much, doesn't do much good. The date of the last update. And this is important too. If you use social media systems like LinkedIn, oftentimes I will go in, as I said, I name it by quarter, and I will put a new resume up, and the only difference is that the name is different. And so it went from B Fackler 2Q21 to B Fackler 3Q21. But what that does is there's a lot of recruiters that mine those areas, and those kinds of things will get picked up by them. Your document is going to be a Word document, but when you send it in, always send it as a PDF. And the reason for that is that sometimes Word documents, if they go particularly between a PC and an Apple, or an Apple and a PC, it will change the formatting and things get all kind of messed up. So always send it as a PDF, and don't use the real tiny font to fit everything in. Use an 11 or 12, and again, you want it to be comfortable to read. 1-inch margins are what is preferred, and that goes to the white space. Bolding can highlight, but just be a little bit careful with that, because it's it can be distracting if it gets overdone. And just like below here, plenty of white space, we talked about that, but lines and boxes can make certain things stick out, but they can also make the document look a little bit crowded. So if you use them, use limits, and they should, and resumes should always be bullet pointed. So does anybody know what the #1 resume mistake is? So
we've got typos. Most people are saying typos.
Typos is exactly right. So the real thing is have multiple people read through it, because I've seen documents, I know documents that I've done, and I've read through them a half a dozen times, and on the 7th time I catch something that I hadn't seen before. So absolutely right. And as somebody who has hired a lot and looked at a lot of resumes, if I see typos in there, I don't even look at it. it goes in the trash pile right away.
Brad, before you had got, I have a really good question sequence that came in through the chat, and
Okay.
it was about how, and this recruiter, how do hiring managers, recruiters find you? Like, do they use LinkedIn? Can you do an unsolicited, like there's no job posting? There's a couple of questions on those.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yep, that's very good. And I mentioned LinkedIn, and recruiters do look through LinkedIn, particularly when they are on a specific job search, and they will look through for resumes on there or people who are doing jobs that are similar to the job they're looking at. So yes, you can send in resumes unsolicited. That generally doesn't do much. What I recommend is to begin your search by targeting companies, targeting areas where you want to live, targeting the companies by those that have technologies or developing technologies in your area of expertise. And so rather than just send in your resume unsolicited, I really recommend the informational interview. So try to find somebody in that company that you can talk to and talk about what it's like to work at that company. What is their experience? What would they recommend you do? There's one question you never ask, and that is, can you get me a job? But there's one question that I recommend that you almost always ask, and that is, who else might you suggest that I could talk to? And the thought is, okay, now they know a little bit about you, a little bit about your background. They may know somebody who has a similar background, works in a similar area, that kind of thing. So you're taking advantage of their opportunities or of their network. So I do recommend that. How do you find those people? You can do LinkedIn searches by company. You can do LinkedIn searches by job title. You can do LinkedIn searches by that kind of thing. So find the people that way. Use the NIH alumni database for people that may have gone into industry, may be working at that company. So those are the kinds of things that I recommend, rather than just sending in the resume by itself.
I'm going to add one on to that from our scientific perspective. Is every time I used to go to a scientific conference, there was always someone there from industry, even if they didn't do the type of science that I wanted. And so I would always talk to all those people who were from different industries to talk to them about what life was like in industry, kind of go through those myths, like industry doesn't do good science, and like kind of talk through all those kind of things. So don't forget, even if you didn't connect with them, you have the list of posters from the last talk you went to, conference you went to, and you can say, I'm sorry I missed your poster, but I'd like to talk to you about what life in industry is like. Another question came in, Brad, that I would love for you to kind of talk about. What's the difference between HR, the hiring manager, and a recruiter?
Okay. Yep. All good. All good questions. There's a separate program that we do that talks about the organization of business, and it talks about these. Where do people work in the organization, and what do they do? The hiring manager is likely going to be a scientist who would be a lab manager. So that would be the person that, if you get that job, you would likely be working for. And in industry, there are delineations, just like there are here in academia. So you would have the lab manager. He would manage a lab, so focusing on one technology. There might be a director and there may be 2 or 3 or maybe 4 labs that would report to that person. And that might be a similar therapeutic area, or a similar type of things that they have various technologies that they're developing. And then there is a vice president of R&D. Likely.
Brad, I think more what I meant there, because we'll get to that talk, is
right.
When from a hiring perspective, what's the HR do versus a recruiter versus a hiring manager?
Okay. Yeah. So the HR person is the one that generally does the first screen on the interviews. And that screen will be done either by them themselves looking for a series of keywords that have been defined by the job ad. And so the likely the first person that you're in contact with would be the HR person within the company. That person then will take, of all the resumes they receive, the ones that most closely fit, and that will go over to the hiring manager, and that hiring manager will conduct the interviews. And the interviews generally start out with a half-hour or 45-minute phone conversation, and then they would move to either a virtual interview or an in-person interview when we get back to normal. Now, many companies, or I should say at least some companies, have begun to outsource some of these functions, and that would be they outsource them to recruiters. And so the recruiter might do that initial task that I had originally defined for the HR person, and then send the closest matches to the HR and the hiring manager. Does that get where the question was going?
That gets exactly to where I was trying to go. And that the recruiter typically is working with like 10 people all at once. And
yes.
That's the other thing, is that the recruiter at the end, the recruiter gets paid by the company. You shouldn't pay recruiters. They should get paid by the company. But the recruiter gets paid, but doesn't care. He's got 10 postdocs. He doesn't care which one of you gets that job. Right. He's just happy one person gets the job because that's how he gets paid.
Right. And I get that question a lot. Are recruiters good or are recruiters bad? And the answer is C, none of the above. They are good because what they have the ability to do is broaden the distribution of your resume. They're a little bad, as Lori explained, because they work for the company, and they may have 4 or 5 people that they've put their resumes in for the same position. They don't care which one gets it, just as long as one of those 4 or 5. Is there anything else before I move on then?
Nope. Go ahead. Go on to cover letters.
Okay. So cover letter has 3 parts. The first part is how you found the job, some basic information on yourself. It's always good to include any company contacts that you have. And it's always good to say something nice about the organization. It is important for me to work for a company that is known for. And it's easy to find that. Go to the homepage of their website, and they will tell you how they want you to look at their company. And that is just a good statement in there. The second part is why you're interested and how you best fit. And again, you will match the job ad wording. What I always recommend is if you're getting ready to prepare your resume and cover letter, that you do the resume first, because this section is really pulling out the key accomplishment statements from your resume. And they wouldn't be in bullet point form here, but they would be those statements. And matching the wording is really important. And part 3 is that you're interested in interviewing, you thank them for their consideration, and you promise to follow up. And homework is, it's always good to name, it's always best if you can address the cover letter to an individual And that would either be the hiring manager or the HR person in that case. Now, I say it's always best, and the degree is important. If this person is a PhD, Dr. So-and-so, much better than Mr. or Ms. So-and-so. And the one caveat here is that many companies, and particularly the larger companies, go to great lengths so you don't know who that person is. And so in that case, dear hiring manager, it's better to do that than to guess at the name and get it wrong. So here we have a very good cover letter. And it's very good, but it's not perfect. So I'm going to we'll kind of highlight here what's very good. All right. We talk about this person who has a connection with that. Restriction enzyme biochemistry and collaborations with Paul Riggs, who works at this place, I think. Yes. Here, a good description of what they are good at. And down here, and the follow-up, I will contact you by a certain date. But it isn't a perfect one. So if anybody can look at this thing in just a couple of minutes, what could be done with this one to make it better? And Lori, I guess we'll look at the.
All right, so formatting needs white space. So Dana, I have to say that this is just trying to shove it onto one slide. Trust me, when I sent this, it didn't look like this. By the way, guys, this is the one that I sent when I was a postdoc going off to thinking about industry. So this is my work, and it's really fun to watch Brad trip over restrictions.
Oh yeah, I can't even say this stuff. So.
I love you, Brad. All right, so formatting needs white space. That's the only thing we got. So that's just because we tried to shove it on one slide.
It was formatted.
Think about the content. Think about the content, not the
yes,
not the formats. We got chat silence going on over here.
Ooh.
Oh, Alexa, she's got one of them. They should have addressed the person by name.
Oh.
Yep. So that's good.
Oh, there it is.
And I'm going to say, if I know Paul Riggs, right, I'm throwing his name in there. I should have called NEB and asked.
Who's hiring this position?
Who's hiring this one? Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
But, yep.
Letterhead. Oh, Osmond, that's a really interesting one. We actually do recommend do not put it on letterhead. Absolutely. Because then especially here at the NIH, if you're an NIH trainee, it kind of makes it look like the government is endorsing you, and that's not allowed. So no letterheads. All right, Dana has said impressed by part is kind of vague. Yeah, so she's got, I don't know, sorry, Dana has one of them. That's one of the next ones.
Okay. And now I'm lost here.
Go ahead. It's right after Paul Riggs.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. All right. And that's the say something nice about the company.
Say something nice, but like what Asma and Dana are saying is, it says here that I'm impressed by the products, but also the academic atmosphere. Well, if I like the academic atmosphere, why am I not just going to academics? Strong attention to detail is unsupported by evidence. That's correct, and it doesn't add very much. Remember, Nirali, this is really, don't think about formatting, because this is really because we tried to shove it on one slide.
Yes.
You guys got a lot of them.
This is a good group. This is a good group. Yeah.
But you want to put the other ones?
Oh no, I only have one.
Oh no, there's other ones. Pivot back one. Pop back one. There's others.
Oh, okay.
So the other one is I name dropped Marlene, Dr. Marlene Belford, who is my postdoc advisor. I only did that for this one because everyone knew her in the field. If I was not going to New England Biolabs, I would have taken Marlene's name out there. There's another one. Oh, the unfortunate thing here is I wish I had the job ad to show you because many of the sentences were taken directly from the job ad. That especially the things talking about this was for someone doing media modifications. So that was really good. There was one other thing that I wanted. Additionally, I have a strong attention to detail was really a weak one. Um, uh, Dr. Babuta has said, underline or bold name people, highlight techniques, etc. I'm actually not a fan, and I'd be interesting to know your philosophy on this, Brad. I don't like bolding in a cover letter at all. Bullets, I think, are okay. Bolding, italics, all the rest of that stuff, I find it really tough to read. I'd love to know your thoughts, though.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I think that to put it out in prose form like this, it's not a very long document anyway, so you don't want to kind of what I would call over-engineer it with the bullets and with the bolding and things like that. A couple of bullets are okay, but you really want it in a letter format.
They're looking to see your writing capacity, how well you can write. That's one of the things they're looking with at a cover letter is how well you can write. Now, we say that, but if you want to bold, this is the one thing about cover letters and resumes. We're going to give you our advice, but in the end, this is your document and you get to do whatever you want with it, right? So you can take that advice and throw it out the window if you don't like it. I totally get it. It's just Brad and I's preference.
So
all right,
yes.
Go ahead, Brad. There's nothing, we're good.
Okay. So just some keys to success here. Never, 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 ever more than one page. And that includes the header and the salutation and the signature. So again, it's not a very long document. Do your homework. Most effective when you can address it to the hiring manager by name and degree and not something nice about the company. And then focus your experience and accomplishments that are most relevant for the job. So if you've heard that the resume and the cover letter are unique to each job, that is true, but it doesn't mean that they're rewritten every time. It means that there's a couple of words here or there that are changed. It may be the order of your accomplishment statements that is more relevant for one job than for another. So it's things like that that change. It's not a complete rewrite. So what do you need to do now? Well, you need to continue building your scientific reputation. Begin to explore industries, companies, positions that you might want to work, where you might want to work, what companies you might want to work for, and what positions. And then work to enhance your network of contacts. And those contacts, now, if you're looking at industry positions, these should be building contacts outside of the NIH. And create your industry resume. So some resources. If you have questions following this up or going forward, this is my email address, so feel free to reach out to me. You can schedule a video appointment with me through the OITE Career Services Center. Here, this is the book that I recommend. And by the way, my recommendations around the resume come from this book as well. There is an OITE careers blog, and there's a whole section on industry that covers virtually everything about the industry and the job search process. Salary benchmarks, if you're looking for, well, here's a position that's interesting to me, but what does it pay? There are the online sources like Glassdoor and Salary Wizard. Be careful on those. They tend to estimate high, and the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it's self-reported data, but the real reason is it doesn't account for tenure in the position. So somebody that's doing that job for 10 years is obviously going to be making more money than the person that does it for one. So the informational interviews are really the best way to get them the most accurate. But these online sources can give you some real good comparative kinds of numbers. And then for transition issues, what's it like working in industry? What's it like to transition from a postdoc at NIH to a company? Those are things that can be covered by the NIH alumni database.
Let's see, we have someone who's not even yet doing a postdoc. So it looks like they're a PhD student and thinking about the next step in industry. What should they consider when they're looking at a postdoc position?
You know, it really doesn't matter. I think and I should say that just to kind of be completely out front, for an industry position, a postdoc is not required. So you wouldn't want to do those. It is not a negative for an industry position. It does give you the opportunity to have 3 or 4 or 5 more years experience than you would have had at your PhD. But I think what you want to do is you want to look for a postdoc. If you're looking for a postdoc position, one that can enhance your knowledge and skills in the area that you're that you have as expertise. There is really no kind of one thing or one kind of good thing or bad thing you can do. The one question that I get sometimes, which is kind of a sideline of this one, if you're planning on going into an industry position, does it make sense to do an industry postdoc? And the answer is probably not. The one thing that an industry postdoc will give you is just experience working within a company. But the experience you get from a scientific perspective is likely pretty much the same. Not all industry postdocs are created equal. There are some good ones. I think, Laura, you mentioned Novartis is good, and there was another one.
Genentech.
And Genentech. So those are the better ones. But the one thing that generally happens is that if you do an industry postdoc, they don't hire you in that company. So there's really no advantage if you say, oh, hey, I want to work for Novartis. There's really no advantage to doing a Novartis postdoc.
Okay, so someone's I got a whole bunch of fast ones that I'm gonna just kind of answer as we kind of go through. Someone's asked about publications in the resume. I do recommend that. You may not put all of them. You could put 7 out of 15 and just put your favorites or something. But yes, I absolutely for an industry job put in your publications. Someone's asked about salary in an informational interview. A great way to ask that is to ask, what's a common starting salary for someone at my stage? Oh, Brad, how about this one? How much, and this goes towards interviewing, which I know is not until December, but how much follow-up to a job interview is too much? I did an interview, I followed up again, I followed up again. How much? It looks like how much should I do? It looks like the job is still open.
Okay. Yeah, and there is a point where you reach that is overdoing it. What I recommend is that the time between when you interview and you do the first follow-up is about 2 to 3 weeks. And then after that, instead of following up directly about the job, my recommendation is to look for either studies that may be of interest to them, ongoing research that may be interested to them, and communicate in that kind of way. I saw this study. I thought you might be interested in it. So not direct follow-up on the job. And there isn't really a finite answer on how much is too much, but you will reach a point with companies where they say enough already.
Yeah, right. So someone's asked about doing an industry internship. I'm going to take that one because my advice differs if you are in the intramural research program than if you're outside of the intramural research program. If you're intramural, they can be kind of difficult because of conflicts of interest, and intellectual property things. And so we don't have a lot of internships in industry for intramural trainees. If you are extramural, check with your postdoc or grad office to see if there's industry internships that you can have access to. Someone else has asked about visas. Visas are tough. Brad and I won't sugarcoat that at all. It depends on the company and if it's a major deal breaker or not. Honestly, if you need a visa sponsorship, your network becomes even more important. So
Yes.
really work on networking. All right, so this, Shweta has asked, a lot of job postings list innumerable technical qualifications. I'm just going to summarize it. They ask for someone who can do everything. All right. They add in, it's a whole bunch of stuff, but then they add in immunology. You don't have all the technical skills, but everything else looks perfect. Should you apply? And how do you convince someone that you're awesome?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will say to that is that when they write those job descriptions, those job ads, I don't believe that there is anybody in the company that thinks they're going to find somebody with every one of the skills and experiences that they put down there. And so it's really up to you. If you see a job ad and you may match 60% of what's on there, and it looks good to you. It looks like something you can do with your experience and your skills. Go ahead and apply. My advice on those is always don't eliminate yourself. They may eliminate you for some reason, but don't eliminate yourself on those.
Dana put in here as a nice addition. In my experience, the big list of skills is that wish list, not a list of requirements. Definitely apply. So yes. Okay. What is our recommendation for someone who wants to go straight from their PhD to an industry job in pharma? You know what? We're seeing more and more people do that, aren't we, Brad?
Yes. Yep. And especially in a time like this when the hiring is very high. And my recommendation would be to start your networking in there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is your network becomes everybody I know who has done it. It's been not through the online black hole of doom, but it's been through their network because people know that they're good. And then also people will wait for them because when you think you're going to graduate is not when you're actually is going to graduate. All of us who have our PhDs here in the room know how many times our dissertation got punted. And so that's really important is to have those people.
Yes.
I'm not sure the question about industry experience in a different field. So Daniel, if you want to add on to that, that would be great. I don't quite understand what you mean. Otherwise, I think we're about done. I think the biggest thing is I put in the chat the next couple things. So interviewing, the organizational business, and also in the spring, we don't have a date yet, is negotiating. But all of those things are also available on our OITE YouTube page. Let's see. Isabella has asked about government positions. Is the job search in cover letter and resume similar? Yes, and the job search is similar. The resume is not.
Yes.
The resume is not. Check out our YouTube video on applying for government jobs.
And networking for government jobs is paramount there too, because otherwise you have to ferret your way through usajobs.gov.
Rebecca's asked a really good questions about networking. And Rebecca, that is a whole nother talk, and I want to be respectful of people's times. That said, it is archived on our YouTube page. So Rebecca, I highly recommend going and checking out the YouTube page on the ways to network. Especially during Zoom. We've seen networking work a lot better during Zoom, which is shocking, I think, for most of us, but people are willing to connect over Zoom very often. I think we're going to wrap it up, Brad, because I think we're out of time.
I think that sounds
good.
And
Alexander, you keep asking the question. I keep answering you via the chat. Yes, that's perfectly fine. So I really appreciate everybody coming. Again, we'll archive this on the OITE YouTube page in about a week. It takes about a week to get all the processing done. So Brad, anything else before we head out the
No,
door?
just, yep. Thank you for coming and for your engagement. I think the questions were very good.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.